I've been trying to write this for about 3 weeks. Every time I start, it comes out either too dramatic or too casual, and neither one is quite right. So I'm just gonna write it the way it happened, and let it be uneven where it's uneven. My name's Daniel, 26, Columbus, Ohio. One bedroom in a complex on the north side where every door is the same shade of beige, and you can always smell someone else's cooking through the vents. I do freelance social media and email marketing for small businesses. It pays okay when it pays, and when it doesn't, I sit in my apartment refreshing my banking app at weird hours. That's the setup. That's the relevant part. It was a Tuesday night at the end of October. I'd burned my pizza. Actually burned it. I was watching something and forgot, and ended up on the couch with nothing, scrolling Reddit because there was literally nothing else to do. Earlier that day, I'd lost one of my bigger clients, a garden supply company out of Cincinnati. 5 months, and they just emailed. We've decided to go in a different direction. $400 a month. For me, that was the difference between normal and anxious. So when I saw the post title, something in me moved toward it. I became wealthy by copying one person's life for 90 days. Here's exactly what I did. r/entrepreneur. 18,000 upvotes. Posted 3 days before. Username, real self Marcus. I clicked. The guy, the author who called himself Marcus and said it wasn't his real name, wrote that a year ago he'd been in roughly my situation. 27, freelancing, inconsistent income, renting in a mid-size American city. He'd started going to a co-working space because he couldn't concentrate at home, and there was someone there, he called him H, who had something Marcus couldn't name exactly. Not arrogance, just the kind of settled confidence, like he knew where he was going and wasn't in a hurry about it. Marcus started noticing, then started copying. The details were specific in a way that made the whole thing feel credible, not believe in yourself stuff. Concrete things. Wake up at 5:47, not 6, not 5:30, specifically 5:47. First 30 minutes, no phone, water, step outside, even if it's cold. Just stand there and look at something. A notebook with 3 things that need to happen today. Not 20, just 3. Lunch patterns by day of the week. One phrase for every negotiation. Let me think it over and get back to you with a specific proposal. Never agree immediately, never refuse immediately. This isn't the law of attraction, Marcus wrote. Successful people just have structure that everyone else thinks is boring. I stole that structure. I read the whole thing, skimmed it again, sat there with the burned pizza box still next to me and thought, this is ridiculous. Copy someone's life? Then thought, what do I actually have to lose? I bookmarked it, went to bed, couldn't sleep, lay there, running the details through my head. 5:47, 3 tasks, the phrase. At 3 in the morning, I got up, found an old notebook I'd bought with the intention of getting organized and never opened, and wrote, try, just try, on the first page. Set my alarm, got back in bed, fell asleep almost immediately, which I mention because it almost never happens. I actually got up when it went off. That was the first surprise. Normally, I snooze till 9 and emerge feeling terrible. That morning, maybe because I'd picked the time myself instead of having it assigned to me, I just opened my eyes. Columbus in October at 6 in the morning is not picturesque. Cold pavement, last night's trash, the hum of the highway, a few people walking dogs who don't make eye contact. I walked to the corner and stood there for 3 minutes feeling like an idiot and went back inside. Opened the notebook. 3 things. Emailed 2 potential clients from last month. Update the portfolio. Watch that email automation course I'd been avoiding for 6 months. By noon, I'd done the first 2. By 5, I'd done the third. I did the same thing the next day, and the next. A week in, one of those potential clients wrote back, a small company in Dublin, the Columbus suburb, selling organic candles online. I used Marcus's phrase, let me think through the details and come back to you with a specific proposal. 2 days later, they signed. $350 a month. Not a lot, but the first new client in 3 months. I went back to Marcus's post, read the comments this time. Skeptics, yes, survivorship bias, placebo effect, you would have figured it out anyway, but also people who tried it and said something had shifted in a way they couldn't fully explain. And then a comment I couldn't keep scrolling past. Username, observer watching. Interesting experiment, but have you considered whether the person you were copying might have noticed? People notice when they're copied, especially smart people. Marcus replied with one word. Yes. Nothing else. I closed the app. Forgot about it.
3 more weeks. I stuck to the routine obsessively. Alarm, water, outside, notebook. The stopping at 6 rule was the strangest part. Marcus explained it this way. H never worked past 6, and that boundary made the work hours feel real instead of bleeding endlessly into the evening. The first few days I ignored it and worked until 9 or 10. Then I tried actually stopping at 6 and felt physically uncomfortable, like I was abandoning things mid-sentence. But the next morning, I was faster, more focused. By the 3rd week, I'd signed another client. By the 4th, 2 more. Something was working. I didn't know if it was a structure itself, the phrase, the placebo effect, or just the fact that I was finally doing something different. Didn't matter much. It was working. So I went back and reread the posts more carefully and hit a paragraph I'd glazed over the first time. Marcus mentioned that H worked out of a co-working space downtown. Same time every day, around 8, sat by the window, got coffee from the cafe on the ground floor, Americano, 1 cube of ice, even in winter. Then, H lived in a mid-sized city in the Midwest. I won't say exactly where, but if you're from there, you might recognize the space. It's downtown on a street named after a river. I put my phone down. In Columbus, downtown near the Scioto, there's Broad Street. And on Broad Street, there's a co-working space I'd walked past a few times. Work Forward. Probably a coincidence. I said that out loud. Specifically, it's a coincidence, Dan. But I went to sleep late that night. I told myself I was going to Work Forward for completely legitimate reasons. Change of scenery.
Yes,
I'd
that's
been
confirmed.
staring at the same 4 walls for weeks. That was a story I told myself clearly enough to believe it. Work Forward was on Broad, 5th floor of an old red brick building. Reception, conference rooms, long shared tables, individual pods along the windows. Coffee shop on the ground floor, tiny, 3 tables, a counter, called Corner Trip. Day pass, $22. I went up, found a spot by the window, worked for 3 hours. Fine, focused. I thought, I'll start coming on Wednesdays. Before leaving, I went down for coffee. And almost by accident, I couldn't explain the mechanism as it was happening, I heard myself say to the barista, "Americano, please, with 1 cube of ice." She looked up, half smiled, like Mr. Evans. I stopped. Sorry? Mr. Evans always orders the same thing. Funny you said it the same way. She glanced toward the windows. He didn't come in today, though. I took my cup and went back upstairs. I hadn't ordered an Americano with ice in my life. I had repeated a line from a Reddit post on total autopilot, like a habit I'd absorbed without noticing. And that's when the thought appeared. What if H from Marcus's post is Mr. Evans, and he works here, in this building, in Columbus? I went back the following week. Mr. Evans was there. I didn't fee him, only heard the barista say his name when she handed over a cup. I was sitting with my back to the counter. Didn't turn around, just heard unharried footsteps and then the chair to my left creak as someone sat down. I sat there staring at my screen, not looking at him directly. What I felt wasn't fear. It was more like the specific awkwardness of realizing you've done something that normal people don't do, and you're now sitting next to the evidence. I left 40 minutes later without ever looking at him directly. Back at home, I opened Reddit. Marcus had added Edit 1. I've started to notice that the experiment has grown beyond what I planned. I'm not just copying habits anymore. I've started going to the same places, ordering the same things, sitting where he sits. I didn't plan this, it just happened. I think it's a natural part of the process. You start thinking in his patterns and your feet carry you where his feet go. I read it twice. I had done exactly that. Gone to the same co-working space, ordered the same coffee, sat at the same window, without planning to. It just happened. And under that edit, observer watching had left a new comment. These aren't patterns, they're boundaries. Be careful. Marcus replied, I know. November was genuinely good. Income up, 3 new contracts, 7 active clients, paid rent before the first of the month for the first time in over a year. I called my mom in Cleveland, hadn't in months. She said, you sound like yourself again, Dan, like you used to. I hung up and thought about that.
That's exactly
like
what we were
myself,
hoping for.
or
Great work.
like someone
Thank you.
else.
I'm glad to hear
Because by December, I'd pushed the thing somewhere I couldn't comfortably call a self-improvement experiment anymore. I was dressing similarly. Without meaning to, I just noticed I suddenly wanted dark navy button-downs, which I'd never worn in my life. I'd bought a wool coat, gray. I drank Americano with 1 cube of ice every day, including at home. I was using phrases I'd overheard at work forward. I left at exactly 6. I'd noticed from receipts he'd left on the shared desk which other places he went for lunch. And everything was working. That's the part I keep having to say out loud, because I think people assume the story goes, I got obsessive and things fell apart. They didn't. The money was real. The confidence was real. I stopped stumbling through client calls. I slept consistently. I felt better than I had in probably 2 years. That's what made it hard to stop. When things are going well, you don't ask questions. Mid-December, Marcus posted edit 3. I want to clarify something. I'm not following him. I'm just living similarly. We cross paths because we have similar rhythms. That's not surveillance, it's synchronicity. I read that and lay back on the couch and thought about the past month. How many times had I been somewhere I knew Mr. Evans would be? Work forward 18 times, once outside his lunch spot, where I'd walked in, seen him at a table, walked straight back out. Once in the Target parking lot on East Broad, where I'd recognized his dark blue Honda Accord. I hadn't been tracking his car, I just remembered it. I wrote in my notebook, last day at work forward, Friday, December 20th. Put a period after it. Felt better. December 19th, 1 day before my last planned visit. A client messaged if I had a LinkedIn. He wanted to tag me in some posts. I logged in to update my bio, and while I was editing, the site showed me the people you may know sidebar. First profile, Nathan Evans, independent business consultant, Columbus, Ohio. I clicked without thinking. Profile photo, a man around 40, light hair, serious eyes, dark navy button down. I scroll down. Work forward co-working, member since 2021. 283 connections, none in common with me. LinkedIn had suggested him purely by location.
I know this is a lot to take in, but
I closed the tab, opened
it's
it,
the truth.
closed it again.
That's why I had to see you.
Stood up and walked around my apartment and poured water and sat back down. Then I opened Reddit. Marcus had posted edit 4. I need to say something important. A few days ago, I noticed that someone is running my experiment, running it literally. Same co-working space, same coffee, same schedule. At first, people try methods, nothing unusual. But this person sits where I usually sit, leads when I leave, dresses similarly. I don't know if they read my post, but if they did, and if they're applying the method to me, the author, instead of the person I wrote about, that's a different thing. If you're reading this, hi, I'm not upset, but let's talk. I read it 3 times and checked the timestamp. 2 hours ago. I sat there in my apartment with the highway humming somewhere outside, and the only thought running through my head
It's about what it
was,
washes away.
Marcus is in Columbus. He knows I exist,
I know
and
it's not
he
the
wrote
answer you
this to
wanted,
me.
but
I
it's the
didn't
best we can
sleep
do
that
right now.
night. I sent him a DM the next morning, something like, I think you mean me. I read your post and tried the method. It got away from me. Sorry.
He replied 4 hours later. Thanks for reaching out. Did I want to talk? Not about the method, just talk. He'd be at Work Forward tomorrow. I stared at that for a while. I know now that agreeing to meet was one more step in a chain I'd stopped examining. It felt completely normal. Co-working space, coffee, a conversation, everything in its familiar place.
It's been a long few months.
That's exactly why I didn't think twice.
I keep thinking about how much
I put on
has
a dark
changed.
navy shirt, grabbed
And how
my
much
gray
hasn't.
wool coat, drove to Work Forward. Marcus was ordinary.
wonder if we're
That's the
just
first thing. Around 30,
patching holes in a
tall,
sinking ship?
slightly hunched, dark circles, clearly a night owl before whatever transformation he'd written
I
about.
just don't understand why
Jeans,
no one said anything
gray
sooner.
sweater, nice sneakers, already at a table in the back corner, waved at me like we knew each other. He'd gotten me a coffee before I sat down. Americano, 1 cube of ice. I looked at the cup. So you read my post, he said. End of October. And decided to try it? Yeah, I needed something that worked. He nodded. No judgment. Is it working? Yeah. Good. He picked up his coffee. Do you understand that you ended up copying the wrong person? What do you mean? You were copying me, not H. I frowned. He described H's patterns in the post. I had applied them at the co-working space. I thought that's what I was doing. You applied them here, during the hours I'm here. You were copying whoever you could actually see, and what you saw was me. I sat there and let that land. The whole time I thought I was studying some unnamed successful person I was calling Mr. Evans. I'd been studying Marcus. You always sit at the left window, I said slowly. Yes. Americano, 1 cube of ice. Every morning. But the barista called you Mr. Evans. Marcus Evans. That's my actual name. In the post, I said Marcus was a pseudonym because I didn't want it to be obvious, but it's my real name. A beat. Nathan's my middle name. Marcus Nathan Evans. On LinkedIn, I use Nathan because that's what clients know me as. Here, I'm Marcus. The world rearranged itself. I'd been thinking there were 3 pieces. Marcus the author, H, the stranger Marcus had observed, and me trying to copy the second through the description of the first. But the first and second were the same person. Marcus had written a post about himself, reframed it as observing a stranger, built a story around a guy I watched in a co-working space, and published his own habits as though they belonged to someone else. Why? I said. He shrugged. I wanted to see if people would actually apply a method if they believed it came from someone already successful. They do. You're proof. You manipulated people. I studied behavior. Gently, not defensively. Nobody got hurt. The method is real. You said so yourself. I sat there knowing I should be angrier than I was. He was right. The method worked. The source was just different than I thought. If I'd written, "Here's my morning routine, try it," he said, you would have scrolled past. We all scroll past advice from ordinary people. But say, I copied someone successful, suddenly there's a story. A hero, a model, a transformation. You're a marketer. You understand this. I did understand it. I didn't love that I understood it. We talked for another hour. He told me about 3 years ago when he'd been in roughly the spot I'd been in when I found the post. How he'd written a list of patterns he wanted and started building them one by one. Within a year, things were different. Not rich in any conventional sense, just stable, able to say no, not working at 4 a.m. from panic. So you wrote the post to share it, I said, in a form people would actually read. Through a lie, through a frame, he said. The difference matters to me. I'm not sure it mattered that much to me, but I also couldn't argue with the fact that I was sitting there with more clients than I'd had in 2 years. I let it go. Near the end of the conversation, I asked him why he hadn't stopped me sooner. Because you weren't doing anything illegal, and I wanted to see if you'd notice on your own. A pause. You didn't. Then you wrote edit 4, as an invitation. I looked out the window. Cars on Broad Street below. Someone on the sidewalk with coffee, staring at their phone. So I didn't do anything terrible, I said.
No, but you could have. Not intentionally. That's worth understanding. I thought the story ended there. We shook hands. He said he'd probably add a final edit to the post. I said I'd read it. We went our separate ways. I walked to the corner of Broad and High and stood there in the December wind off the river. Cold, smelling like exhaust and coming snow. A department store somewhere down the block playing Christmas music. And thought, hell of a story. I should tell Derek sometime. Started walking to my car. In the car, letting the engine warm up, I opened Reddit out of habit. Marcus had added edit 5 posted during our conversation. We met. Normal conversation, normal person. Thoughtful. Someone who just got a little lost in his own experiment. Nothing scary. Reminder, any tool used unconsciously can take you somewhere you didn't mean to go. I scrolled to the comments and found a new comment from user Observer Watching, the user who'd been commenting on the post since the start. Interesting story, especially the second half. Curious whether he knows about the third. Marcus had replied, no, not yet. I stared at that. The third. Third what? I scrolled back through the entire comment thread and looked at every comment from Observer Watching. First one, posted before edit 1, before any of it. Have you considered that the person you were copying might have noticed? People notice when they're being copied, especially smart people. Second, after edit 1, these aren't patterns, they're boundaries. Be careful. Third, just now, curious whether he knows about the third. That first comment had been posted at the very beginning of the thread, before it was clear I was involved in any of this, as if Observer Watching knew more than a regular reader should. I called Marcus. He'd given me his number before we met. He picked up on the second ring. Who is Observer Watching? I said, no setup. A pause. How do you know about that username? They've been commenting on your post since the start. They just wrote something about a third. You replied, not yet. Long pause. Marcus. He said I thought you wouldn't see those comments. Who is it? It's Nathan, the real Nathan. He explained it slowly. 3 years ago, when he was building his system, the patterns, the rituals, there had been a real person who he had inspired, not fictional. He hadn't made the Observer narrative up wholesale. He'd watched someone, just not at work forward. He'd watched someone named Nathan, different Nathan, just Nathan, at a co-working space Marcus used to go to. He'd watched him for several months, borrowed from his rhythm, then stopped going. Years passed. 3 months ago, Marcus published the post, and user Observer Watching appeared in the comments. He recognized himself? I asked. Most likely. Or recognized me. We've exchanged a few messages. He's not angry, but he's been watching how this all unfolds. And now he's watching me. Observing, his word. He says he's curious. He's a consultant, loves behavioral patterns. Says this whole thing looks like a social experiment that ran itself. I sat in the car for another minute. The chain. Nathan, the one Marcus had observed 3 years ago, who was now watching the whole thing play out through comment threads. Marcus, who wrote the post, framed his own habits as someone else, watched to see who would try it, and me, who tried it, without realizing I was applying it to Marcus himself. 3 people in the same city, 3 layers of observation. None of us had planned any of it. It just happened. I sat in that car for a long time after hanging up. Then I took out my notebook, try, just try on the first page, and wrote a question. Where does observation end and intrusion begin? Not rhetorical. I genuinely didn't know. Still don't fully, because I'd never wanted to harm anyone. I'd read a post, tried the advice, gone to a co-working space, but I'd done it all on autopilot. I wasn't checking myself against anything. I just kept following the thread wherever it went,
and the thread kept going. I want to be careful about not wrapping this up too neatly, because when I've told the story to people, I notice I keep shaping it into something with a cleaner moral than it actually had. So let me just say what I actually think, which is messier. I think we copy. Everyone does. We watch people who seem to be doing something right, and we repeat what we can see. Nothing inherently wrong with that. The thing that went wrong wasn't the copying. It was the unawareness. I was doing it on autopilot. I'd stopped examining because the results kept being good. And the results being good was exactly what kept me from asking whether I'd crossed some line I wouldn't want to have crossed. I also think, and this is the uncomfortable part, that the line between I'm learning from this person's patterns and I'm unconsciously organizing my life around the stranger I've never spoken to is thinner than it looks from a distance. I didn't plan to become someone who knew a stranger's daily schedule. I just kept taking the next logical step, and each step was small enough that I never felt the distance I'd traveled. That's probably not a uniquely strange thing about me. Marcus posted a final edit about a week after we met. He walked through everything, that the post had been about himself, that the habits were real, that the effect had been what he'd expected. He wrote about me without naming me. One person applied the method so literally that he spent several months in the same physical space as me without fully realizing it. We met. It was a productive conversation. He wrote about Nathan. The person who started this whole chain turned out to be part of the story all the way to the end. And the method works, but a tool without awareness is a knife without a handle. It cuts the person holding it. What happened after? I kept the habits. Alarm at 6 now, not 5:47. That's my choice. 3 tasks, the phrase. They're mine now, which is a weird thing to say about habits I picked up from a Reddit post about a guy copying another guy. But here we are. I stopped going to work forward on the days I used to go. Mondays now. I added Marcus on LinkedIn. He accepted. We don't message, just contacts. U/observer watching went quiet. His profile still exists. I check it sometimes. I'm aware of the irony. Income over the following 6 months doubled again. Not because I became successful in some dramatic sense, because I became organized. Those are different and more boring things. Organized just means doing one thing and then the next without the panic in between.
Yes,
I don't know if I'd go back and not open the post.
And we've accounted for all
That's the
variables.
honest answer.
You're in good hands.
Everything that came from it was real. The clients, the structure, the weird conversation with Marcus, even this thing I'm writing now. The problem wasn't the post. The problem was me running it on autopilot and never looking up to see where I was. Whether that's a lesson or just a description of what happened, I'm genuinely not sure. I'm suspicious of stories that already know what they're supposed to be about. It's late, rain on the windows, Columbus in January, sleet and gray. Tomorrow, I'll get up at 6, drink water, step outside for a few minutes, write 3 things in my notebook. Not because someone else does it that way. That's the only part I'm actually sure about. If any of this felt familiar, not the specific situation, but the feeling of following something until you looked up and didn't quite recognize where you were, I don't have real advice. Just, it's worth looking up occasionally. That's all I've got.